Good morning, Peter. How you doing? You well?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm blessed. Always.
Good
All the
man.
better for
Good
talking
man.
to you, though, sir, because you're an expert in money. One of my favorite areas at the moment, because it's an important subject, especially right now. You're a financial expert, financial coach, TV personality with a passion for educating people on how to best implement some good habits. Right? I know
That's
2020.
right.
I know in 2020 you founded a YouTube channel which has been very popular. For those who are watching, it's Conversations of Money, and you've got a podcast as well. Tell me about what motivated you to start that channel, that platform, and talk about some of the subjects that you cover.
Right. So the YouTube channel and the podcast really, it covers quite a lot, but I predominantly talk about investing. Predominantly, I talk a lot about pensions. I talk a lot about obviously mortgages, getting on the property ladder, that kind of stuff. It's really all about disseminating information so that people can take that and implement that into their own lives. Because I've been in financial services for 15 years, and I would say that I didn't belong in financial services. If you look back at my very, very early years, in fact, it was the last place that I thought I would ever work. But when I was in it and started to kind of like understand how money moves around, how wealthy people tend to deal with things, what pensions are, how investments work, the the main thing that kept ringing in the back of my mind was, well, how come I didn't know about this when I was like 18, 19, 20 years old? And so really the podcast and the YouTube channel is kind of that conduit for me to get everything that I've learned here into the world so that people can take it and benefit from it, really.
I understand your first foray into the financial services came as a cashier at the Portman building a few moons ago. I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
You've already said you were in it for 15 years. You already said you were 15. You worked as a cashier, but you worked your way up to the executive team of a Fortune 100 company based in Canary Wharf, right?
Yeah.
I know the journey hasn't been easy, Peter. It's literally a case of started at the bottom, now you're here, right? Talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, so I look back over my journey now, and I look back at it, and I'm just so kind of like grateful for it, because like if I had to go back and kind of tell my 18, 19-year-old self, like, dude, this is what's in store for you, I don't think that I would really believe it myself. I was fostered from 3 months to 8 years old. My parents are Nigerian, so they came over here in the 70s and stuff. And like most parents did back then, they came to work and study to earn some money, send money home back over to Nigeria and kind of, establish themselves there. And they had me, I guess, in the midst of all of that. And back in the 70s, it was common that, they would literally just pop their kids in a foster care home or with a foster family. And that's basically what happened with me. They put I think it was an ad in the paper. They went to see a couple of families down in Hastings, Sussex, and I ended up with one of those families from 3 months to 8 years old. And they had this great idea that, I had three older brothers that I was completely unaware of. I met one of them, I think, when I was like maybe 5 or 6 for like 2 weeks during the summer. Because that's the only time that I used to see my proper parents for back then, in the summer for 2 weeks, because they were busy working. And they had this idea that, when I was 8, they'd send for me, go to Nigeria. It was supposed to be a 2-week holiday. I spent 10 years out there, and I came back in 98. They gave me 50 quid. I was like, go back to your foster parents' house and crack on, basically. And me being me, I'm a little naive. I didn't really understand what the world was like. Jumped on the plane. I was on the plane and I realized, hang on a second, what if my foster parents don't live at that address anymore? Because I've not spoken to them for 10 years. So rock up on their doorstep, nobody home. And your mind starts thinking the worst, essentially. Luckily, they were there. But yeah, I mean, through all of that time, trying to get my feet under the table with them, get my first job, I've been homeless. To see that I've gone through all of that, was really poor with money, very, very bad credit rating. I was bouncing checks when I was much, much younger because I was homeless, and it was the only way really to survive. It was the only source of capital that I had. To then work in a bank as a cashier, in a building society as a cashier, was kind of like, I never thought it was going to happen. And at the time, I was actually on job seekers allowance. And I had to go to this interview because a guy said, this job will be good for you. But it's like, I owe these banks money. I don't want to rock up and be like, hey, I want a job, by the way. That's not what I want to do. But the simple situation was, if I didn't go to that interview, I was going to be taken off benefits. I'd lose my benefits. So I rocked up to this interview in jeans and a leather jacket, completely disinterested, tried to sabotage it as much as possible. And for some reason, the lady who interviewed me, a lady called Jenny Berry, she was like, oh, my customers are going to love you. And she offered me the job, and the rest is really history.
Wow, that's amazing. So it's almost fate, really, isn't it? You was meant to trod this road, as they said.
I guess so. But I mean, like I said, it's great to look at these kind of things in hindsight, right? But, I didn't belong in that world. Definitely didn't belong in that world. I mean, back then it was prestigious to work for a bank or a building or a financial services company or building society. Not so much now, but back then it was very prestigious. So you kind of got that immediate sense of, oh my God, I'm here. And I'm one of those people, because of my time in Nigeria, I'm acutely aware of opportunity and not squandering opportunity. We have so much at our disposal in the UK that if I walk into a situation right now, I want to make the best of the opportunity that I have right there and then. And that's kind of what I've tried to do through my career in financial services, really.
So where did you go from the bank, and how did you adapt? What was it? How did you identify a lane that was for you?
Well, to start off with, I mean, so I used to watch Apprentice for years, right? So that flyover shot of Canary Wharf and the pointy building, for me, when I got into financial services, I was very acutely aware that there was a HSBC and there was Canary Wharf, and it's kind of the financial center. And I was like, I would love to work there at some point. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I was like, if you can get there, you've made it, you're set for life, right? And I've had some very, very good mentors. So Jenny Berry gave me my first job. There was a lady called Mandy Mitchell who really helped me understand that you've got different parts of the financial services sector, particularly in banking. So you've got retail banking, corporate banking, and then beyond that, you can move over to things like pensions, annuities, wealth management. And that's kind of what I did. But Mandy was instrumental in helping me move from retail banking, which is customer facing, into corporate banking, where I'm working with businesses to fund cars, vans, plant machinery, big pieces of equipment to help businesses grow. And from there, I went, and it's a bit of a weird jump. I quit the job, moved back into London, and I was like, I must be able to find a job in Canary Wharf or London somehow. And I quit the job, moved back to London. This is in 2012. And I didn't have any money. I was living on an overdraft. And just as I was about to run out of money, I got a phone call from a guy called Jason Webber, who's a recruitment agent. And back then, you used to put your address on your CV. And he goes, there's a job very, very close to you that I think you're going to be perfect for. These are the details. I said, where is it? He goes, Canary Wharf. I went, great. Okay. Because I always used to walk around Canary Wharf just to kind of get a feel for it. And he goes, yeah, it's in the really big building. And I said, what floor? He goes, 50th floor, 1 Canada Square. And I was like, oh my God, this has got to be fate, right? It has to be fate. And he goes, look, there's a telephone interview that you need to go to. It's going to be on this day. If you get past that, you're going to go to the actual face-to-face interview, and I'll prep you for that. But get through the telephone interview first. So me being me, I went to Canary Wharf to actually take the phone call, the telephone interview. So I was in the environment. I could kind of mentally prepare myself and mentally visualize myself there. Got through the telephone interview. Then we had the proper recruitment day, which was a full day. And I remember Jason saying to me, listen, don't turn up late. Just be early, and be early. Don't be late. So I rocked up like 20 minutes early into this room thinking I'm going to be one of the first people there. I got walked into this boardroom overlooking literally London, like the river, Tower Bridge, the Shard. And I was the last person to walk into the room of 25 guys, basically. And so started the day. It was elimination rounds. They had teamwork, like group exercises that you'd do. You had like individual tasks that you had to do as well. So they were cutting people pretty much every hour. And got to be one of the last 4 people that day out of 25. And yeah, the rest is kind of history, because started there in 2012, and that was the company that I ended up being on the exec team by the time I left in 2017.
So that's when the work started, really.
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. I mean, there was a lot that I learned during that period of time. I mean, everything through retail banking, corporate banking, I learned a lot. I probably learned the most in Canary Wharf, where it was all about wealth management, because then you're managing people's wealth, you're talking to wealthy people, and you're getting an insight into what wealthy people do, where they put their money. And when I qualified as a financial advisor, and I was working with financial advisors in the run up to qualifying as a financial advisor, you started to see how wealthy people actually think, their mentality, how they put their money and how they allocate their cash. It was really quite something. It was very, 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 very eye-opening and completely new.
What was the biggest difference you found with the mindset of a wealthy person and someone who, I don't know, you would have encountered in retail who wasn't as wealthy?
I can use myself as a prime example for this, right? So, and I think this is true for most people. I think a lot of the time when we get paid, we think about what bills we have, we pay those, and if there's money left over, there's money left over, and we have fun with that money, and that's it, right? It's gone. Wealthy people think very, very differently. And across every single couple or person I worked with, either as a consulting person on a case or as an advisor on my own, they don't look at it the same way. So yes, they've got their bills. That's one thing. Then they think about, right, what are the kind of things that I want to enjoy doing? So if it's gym, holidays, whatever, right? They allocate a bit of money to that. But then there's this additional piece, and all of them do this. There's this additional piece of money that they then put aside and invest towards, I don't know, property, investments, business. And it's three very distinct silos, as opposed to just the two that I used to work with. I got my money in, pay my bills, the rest, hey, I'm going to have fun with it. It's a very, very different approach that they take with the three pots: essentials, fun money, but actually money for the future, business, property, invested. And that's the biggest kind of theme that I found in wealthy people and the way they allocate cash and the way they view their money.
Your journey is seeing you land a role as a financial expert on Channel 4's Secret Spenders, and you've become a regular contributor on Lorraine on ITV. You got to be pleased with the way things are going. But where to next? Where do your ambitions kind of take you? Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time, for instance?
5 years time, I want to basically, so the whole reason why I started what I do right now is I do want to share my knowledge first and foremost, but there's a bigger, I guess, driver than just helping people obviously make the best financial decisions and get themselves kind of clued up when it comes to financial instruments and the markets and how to allocate and use money. And that is, my background isn't too dissimilar to, I think, a lot of people out there who go through a lot of struggles and difficulties. And in the next five years, I want to be able to kill two birds with one stone, really. And that is, yes, number one, educate people on financial education and, invest in allocating money, all this kind of stuff. But I really do want to inspire kids who may be struggling at the moment, who come from a similar background to me, to say, I don't have a university degree, but I found myself in Canary Wharf, number one, because of sheer hard work, and because a company was willing to take a chance on me. And I want to be able to be that example where people can have a look at what I've done and what I'm doing currently and say, well, actually, if he can do it without a university degree, and I'm not necessarily as smart as a lot of other people out there, then I can do exactly the same thing. And that's really the big driver for me, to have a positive impact. And I'd like to have a positive impact on those two fronts specifically, because I think when you think of legacy specifically, life isn't just about what you do for yourself and what comforts you can afford yourself. It is about how you can actually pull people up around you as well. Let's
go forward. 10 years in Nigeria. I can imagine that was a pivotal time in your life. You already kind of touched on the fact that you, as a result, recognize opportunity, right, when it presents. Talk about how else that time shaped you in terms of the man you are today.
the biggest lesson that I learned, I guess, from Nigeria, I mean, there are a few, but, I definitely watched my dad work really, really hard. And I watched my mum work really, really hard. And it gives you an appreciation for things that sometimes we take for granted here in the UK. I mean, culturally, it's completely different. And from just a day-to-day living amenities, it's completely different. I mean, in most instances, we didn't have any running water. We didn't have any electricity for weeks and months on end sometimes. And because my parents weren't necessarily wealthy, you then have to deal with the struggle of, okay, where's the next meal coming from? And so it's given me, I guess, a very unique perspective on kind of life. And back then, and I think about it now, back then it was all about, we looked after each other. You know what I mean? We looked after each other. We also looked after our next door neighbor. If our next door neighbor didn't have any food, we would feed them. If we didn't have any food, our next door neighbor would feed us. There was more of a community kind of feeling back then. And to a certain extent, I miss that, because I guess in Western culture, it's very much, you are your own entity, you are your own silo. And I think that works to a certain degree, but to a certain degree, I think it's pretty unhealthy, because you don't get that sense of community, that sense of camaraderie where you want to pull each other up. And just the appreciation for opportunity. I mean, I was lucky enough to be born here in 79. And it's pure luck. It's pure luck that I'm here, right? So if it is pure luck that I'm here, in my mind, I'm all about, well, how much impact can I have for other people? And yes, I do want to make a nice life for myself, but I'm a firm believer that, if you want to talk about financial success, that is always a byproduct of good work. And if you do good work, that legacy stays longer than you could ever imagine. And making the most of the opportunities that are here is how I hope to be able to do that. I'm lucky enough now that I've been thrust into this opportunity to do, Channel 4 Secret Spenders this year, which led on to Lorraine. I'm doing Steph Pack Lunch this year, well, for the rest of the year up until December now. I have all of this opportunity in front of me. And because I've lived in Nigeria for 10 years where opportunities are few and far between, it would be criminal of me not to take advantage of those opportunities and try and maximize them. And that's really what I've taken away from my time in Nigeria. Number one, just an appreciation for what we have and the opportunity that's available, and trying to use that opportunity in a positive light.
All right, Peter. Tell me, what should people be focused on in 2022 as legacy markets flip from one extreme to another? The whole global infrastructure teeters on the brink of some significant historical change. And I say that because my mind's full of so many questions I want to ask you that you probably can't answer, because you're probably in the same boat of trying to ascertain what's going on. It feels like a reset, Peter. It's a term that keeps getting thrown out. We've seen what's happened to the pound recently as a result of the mini budget. We're seeing what's happening to the yen, the euro. There's a lot going on that doesn't fill people with that sense of safety that maybe they might have had over the last decade or so, or pre-pandemic, pre-lockdown. So where should people be focused in terms of making investments, that area, that silo that you said most people don't factor into their finances? What should they be looking at? I'm not saying you've got all the answers, but throw out a few, suggestions, areas of focus from your perspective.
Okay, so let's escalate this from the very beginning first and foremost, right? So the first thing we need to be really mindful of, given where the direction of travel is taking us right now, is to make sure that from a financial point of view, we've got the strongest foundations possible. Interest rates are about to go up. Well, they are going up right now. Mortgages are going to spike massively. We're already seeing spikes in energy costs, fuel costs, food costs. that's going to get worse. It's going to get really, really bad over the course of this winter. So first and foremost, we need to make sure that our finances from a personal point of view are locked down, nailed down. And that is doing the boring stuff, unfortunately. It's making sure that, you're not spending your money on things that you don't 100% need. Yes, you can give yourself a little bit leeway, and that's for you to decide on your own personal circumstances, but not to be spending money where you don't need to be spending. You need to retain as much of that as possible. Give yourself a buffer, an emergency fund if you possibly can. Trying to make sure that you're addressing any debts that you have right now, with interest rates increasing and mortgage prices and rent prices all going up. If you are too heavily laden with debt, you need to try and see if you can manage that down a little bit. Once you've got all of that in order, there is still opportunity within the markets to invest. I mean, investors, they live for recessionary periods. And if this is going to be a recessionary period, this is where you invest in the markets and you hold for the long term, because off the back of a recession, typically we see massive market swells, and that's where a lot of wealthy people will make money. There are lots of things you can actually do. There are different ways of actually investing. The easiest way, and the one that I say suits someone who may not necessarily understand how investing works, so you might be a little bit new, would be to select a provider that can help you invest. So that could be the likes of Moneybox, Money Farm, Wealthify, for example, and just put money with them. They will manage the investments for you, but allocate a certain amount that you can afford not to access in the medium to long term. Other than that, if you wanted to be more hands-on, you could go and buy, a load of index funds or ETFs with Vanguard. You can go and buy the S&P 500, which is the US market with a global span of companies. There's lots of things that you can basically do, but I would encourage everyone, investing has been very sexy for the last 2 years. It's been sexy because everything's been going up. We're now on that cycle where everything's going down. And I've been saying for the past 2 years, when you're investing, you have to understand why you're investing. You need to have a very clear goal. You have to understand how long you're looking to invest for. Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 15 years? At that point, you can then decide how you actually want to invest. There's tons of stuff on the podcast and the YouTube that actually walk people through that. But I would encourage people to start looking into it. If you have an appetite for new information and you want to explore something new, this is something that's worthwhile. There are risks, obviously. You can put your money in today. Your money just, it halves or goes minus 20%. You have to understand how to manage that risk. So it's not just jump in willy-nilly. You've got to do your research, but investing in a recessionary period can be extremely fruitful for the long term because of the returns that you can actually get from it. But you have to be able to manage the risk and understand that there is risk involved as well.
Well, I guess you get approached all the time from people who are picking your brain and trying to work out where they should put their money. What are some of the mistakes you see commonly made by those who don't have the knowledge or maybe are acting in a knee-jerk way?
So many. So the first mistake is just jumping in without doing any research at all. Like, watching 1 or 2 videos on YouTube isn't going to be enough. I mean, yes, you can get a very basic understanding on overview, but one thing you'll find, and people say this to me all the time, is because there is so much depth to the information that you need to know when you're investing, you can go and watch 2 or 3 videos or read 2 or 3 articles and think you know everything. You don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. So I see people jump in feet first without any caution whatsoever. Biggest mistake ever. I always say to people, because there is risk with investment, you have to take it at a pace where you're able to make mistakes. And if you did make a mistake, it's not going to cost you too badly. So in other words, starting softly, and as your confidence basically grows, you can increase the level of risk that you're taking. A prime example is just people buying just individual stocks. I'm going to go buy Tesla because Tesla's been trending in the news. Bad mistake. Like, Tesla is extremely volatile. I know a lot of people who put money into Tesla thought it was going to go up. It goes down because Elon sends a tweet. I mean, this week is a prime example with the Twitter deal, right? It's back on, so Tesla's taken another hit. You have to understand the risk element to it. You have to understand how you're actually going to manage the risk as well. So jumping feet first without any research and going in with too much money is the biggest mistake that I see people make.
I guess you mentioned a lot of legacy markets and regulated opportunities. What I see and hear a lot of is the younger generation looking to more nascent assets, specifically digital assets, crypto, the NFTs, that sort of thing. Talk about the pros and cons of dipping your toe into that space.
Look, the future really is crypto and the blockchain. That is the future. The issue that you have with that at the moment is it is unregulated. And so you look over the last 2 years, how many scams there have been, from NFTs to meme coins. There have been tons and tons and tons of scam. Why? Because it's unregulated. There is nobody acting as a watchdog at the moment. I mean, I could literally set up a website if I was in Vietnam, invent my own coin, put out a white paper, pay a few influencers to pump it, to promote it. And we've seen this so many times over the last 2 years. It is too easy to do. So for me, when I speak to younger people, I say, look, yeah, you know what? Crypto is actually a good option for you for the future. And I wouldn't say ignore it completely, because I think it would be foolish to ignore crypto. But at the same time, again, it's about risk management. So think about traditional investment vehicles and use that as your foundation, with the crypto bit being the speculative bit. So in other terms, what I would say there is, if I had to give an example, maybe have 70%, 80% of your money in traditional markets, then another 20% or 30% in things like crypto spread across a number of coins, be it Bitcoin, ETH, whatever that you choose. But be cautious with it, because it is still very unregulated and it's actually very, very volatile as well.
One of the more secure markets over the last 10, 12 years has been the housing market. I say secure, it's gone on an upward trajectory, which looks like it's about to be curtailed. People are predicting all sorts in the future. How do you see the housing market, which, like I say, bricks and mortar has been traditionally a safe haven?
I think we're going to see the housing market close down. I mean, not close down, slow down. I don't think that we're going to see the kind of crash that we saw back in 2007, 2008, because I just think that it's a very different time now, and things have moved on. I think it will cool off. I mean, I certainly know, and I was having this conversation with somebody this week who works with a lot of property investors, landlords, and they're just like, hang on a second, this is getting a bit too much now. Mortgage rates are going up. When you think about property and you're having one as an investment, you've then got to think about, do you have tenancy, rent, insurance? You need a life insurance policy just to make sure that you've got that covered as well. You've got to have, maybe agent fees, all that kind of stuff, a pot of money just in case things go wrong, and you've got servicing fees. And a lot of people looking at it now thinking, well, actually, if my mortgage payment is going to be going up here and I can't increase my rent like they're suggesting in Scotland, I'm just going to sell the properties right now. And I know a lot of people actually thinking about that because it feels as though it's becoming less profitable now. The interest rate rise is going to be eating into people's margins and people's returns. And I think that will lead to a supply of properties going back into the market for first-time buyers. I think it will slow down. I don't think it will crash. But then new first-time buyers still need to contend with rising interest rates, which is going to be interesting, because I think it's going to be difficult now to afford a mortgage, even with property prices potentially coming down. It's a difficult place to be if you're a first-time buyer right now.
Yeah, I guess my last area of focus would be the power of your dollar, your pound, your yen, your euro. It seems to be frittering away. How do you offset that? I mean, the natural, I guess, course of action would be to find markets that offset the demise, right? But what would they be? What would they look like? I'm again not suggesting you have all the answers, but these are some of the conversations I'm having right now.
That's a difficult one, really, because I mean, look, the pound has taken a bit of a hammering. I think it's recovered at the moment. I think yesterday it was trading at $1.13, and so obviously, if you're investing in pounds and you're investing in the US markets, well, actually, it's costing you more to invest in the US markets. I think it's important to take context of what the US markets are. So the US is the biggest economy on the planet. I think China is very, very close. I think second right now. But China's got issues of its own. I mean, there are some serious issues that side of the world. So if you are investing, for example, where are you going to invest? America is the predominant market. Now, whilst it might cost you a little bit more to invest in that economy because of the value of the pound to the dollar, you're going to have that currency exchange rate. I think it's really important to not let that put you off, because essentially what you're doing is you are investing into the biggest economy in the world. And within that economy, they have got the S&P 500, which is the top 500 companies in the world. And fundamentally, when you look at what those companies do, who they service, what products they actually provide, these are things that we cannot live without. So there are energy companies in there. There are financial companies in there. There are companies that sell food, that sell drink. There are companies in there that basically develop the technology that we use day to day and will need moving forward. So essentially, you're investing into the future. You're investing into current infrastructure. And I think that is the fundamental thing that you should focus on when you're looking to invest, rather than the currency strength specifically. The hope is that you'll get the growth in that market to offset the poor performance of the pound. But because we can't control any of that stuff, it's all about making sure that you pick the right environment to invest in. And those should be the leading thoughts and leading conversations that we have when it comes to the power of the pound. I mean, look at the mini budget. Completely and utterly unnecessary that the pound crashed to the point that it did. I mean, why did they just not listen to Rishi Sunak? I mean, why? So you've done this, and now this has happened to the pound. As a result of that, interest rates have gone up, mortgage rates have gone up. It was completely and utterly uncalled for. But the point is, we can't control any of that. There'll be blunders in the future from an economic, political point of view that are completely outside the realm of our control. What we can control is the decision of where we place money and what we invest in. Because if you have a solid decision tree for those things specifically, everything else, yes, it might impact it, but everything else becomes, to a certain degree, not really relevant.
All right, I'm going to ask. I was going to make that my last question, but I'm going to ask this one. The fiscal strategy and the central bank strategy, there seems to be a disconnect, and one that I'm not sure your everyday man or woman in the street really understands. Are we talk about that situation and the dynamics of that? We're in a very unique time. So how do you see that playing out?
Well, look, the main thing here is inflation. Okay, so everyone who watches or reads this should understand what inflation is. So inflation is simply the increase of goods and services increasing around us. Okay, now typically high inflation is driven by high demand of a resource that is low in supply, right? So high demand, low supply, because you've got more people vying for this thing, price pushes up, right? Now, typically, in a normal world, if this was on your high street, like there was, I don't know, a pair of Nike trainers, right? Let's use this as an example. That completely and utterly rare. We see this in Jordan and all of the sneakerheads right now, right? If a shoe gets launched, there's only a limited number and there's so many people want it, the price of that shoe will increase. Now, central banks, and the Bank of England specifically, is responsible for, the strength of the pound, the economy, all that kind of stuff. That's their job. Now, to combat inflation, what they will do is they will raise interest rates. And what that is designed to do is to encourage people to save more and spend less, reducing the demand for short supply. That should then cool down prices. But the main driver for inflation for us has been oil and gas prices because of wholesale markets, partly to do with Russia, Ukraine, and the war. Now, the Bank of England has gone ahead and increased interest rates, done nothing for inflation the entire year. I've been talking about this on the podcast and on my channel the entire year. It's not going to work. Why? Because there is no way that we can influence the supply versus demand equation of oil and gas when it's coming from, Russia is one of the biggest exporters and producers in the world. So you can't impact that. Now, when Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng turn around in the mini budget and say, we're going to borrow 150 billion quid so we can actually, cap the unit price charge for households. So it's not going to be anything more than £2,500 for the year for a typical household. But also what we're going to do is that's going to cost us 150 billion pounds. But what we're going to do is we're going to give the highest earners in society a price cut. a tax cut of at 45p. So essentially what you're doing, and I've been saying this, if this is personal finance, you're bankrupt, you're finished, you're done, you're completely and utterly done, because what you're doing is you're borrowing more money, but you're reducing the amount of money you have coming in. And that is what spooked the markets and investors, because they're like, hang on a second. So if you're going to be borrowing all of this money, and bearing in mind, we borrowed money for furlough, we borrowed a lot of money. If you're going to borrow so much money, but you're going to give a tax cut, then hang on a second, we're concerned how you're going to be able to pay this money back. So what then happens as a result of that is these investors stop buying government debt, which is UK government gilt. So that's IOUs to the government. That plummets the pound. Now, the pound, the value of the pound versus the dollar, we import a lot of stuff. So if we're importing energy and it's being paid for in dollars, all of a sudden that becomes inflationary because the pound has come down in value against the dollar. It's costing you more money to buy things. So that means inflation keeps going up. The Bank of England then has to step in with interest rate rises on the opposite side. Now, the Bank of England is independent to the government, but it felt as though those two entities were not talking. Well, they didn't talk with the mini budget, as we already have found out. There was nothing from the Office of Budget Responsibility to see how they was actually stack up. There was no communication. So it feels as though they're doing two different things and they're at loggerheads when they really should be working together, even though the Bank of England is an independent body that sets interest rates.
Yeah, it's going to be complex moving forward, I guess, because like you said, the current process and strategy hasn't worked, hasn't impacted in the way that it's been anticipated, or I'm not even sure if it was anticipated. I think it was just that's how the mechanism has always reacted. And so let's do what we've always done. Let's do what we know. But we've got a unique situation with what's driving inflation. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in 2023. So I'm sure we're going to have another chat, Peter. It's been a real pleasure, and you've offered some great insight. I hope people can cotton on to a lot of what we've been speaking about. And if people have any other questions, they should jump in the comments and share them with us. Where can they find you? Where are your socials?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I'm Conversation of Money. On YouTube, it's Conversation of Money. The podcast is the Conversation of Money podcast. So if you follow me on Instagram, if you have any questions about anything that I've just discussed, I do Q&As on there. So you can join a Q&A. I'll go live, answer some questions. I often do that on YouTube as well sometimes. So if you find me there, you can DM me, you can send me a message, ask me a question. I'll always respond to people who send me questions.